Welcome to Peter and Roughie's Football Show. Alan Ruff is alongside me, Peter Martin. Delighted that Thomas Jordan joins us here in the studio, as ever, talking about football Monday to Friday. On the show tonight, Roy Keane will not be the next Celtic manager after opting to stay with the Republic of Ireland as the assistant. We will be speaking to Pat Bonnar, who'll give us his take on the decision from Roy Keane not to take the job. And after allegations of bribery and corruption, is there a possibility of Qatar missing out on hosting the 2022 World Cup? Just a few of the topics we will be discussing tonight, and as ever at this time we'll go into the boot room with our first guest, and that is Pat Bonnar. Pat, thank you for joining us on the programme. Your immediate reaction to Roy Keane's decision to knock back the Celtic job?
Yeah, I'm quite amazed actually, because there was a lot of talk over the weekend, and especially in Ireland. I was over there on Friday, and everybody was talking about it because Martin O'Neill had come out and sort of said that there was talks going on, which, normally if Martin came out to say that, then you would expect that decision that was almost made. For him to knock it back, or whether he was offered it in the first place, we're not too sure. But I'm amazed with that actually, because it would be a step into a job for Roy. He's an assistant, great. Fantastic. He's with his country, and he's working with Martin O'Neill, and they're the bonuses of that job. But I think for Roy to get back in to a full-time job on his own, being the boss, this was a perfect opportunity for him.
Pat, it's Thomas Jordan here at Sunday Post. I was just going to ask you, how big a blow would this be to Celtic for somebody to come out publicly and knock back the job? But we've been made aware that they have been speaking to various candidates, but it does seem the case that it was Roy's job if he wanted it, and
Well, we're not sure about that, are we? I don't think, was he offered a job?
Yes.
I'm not so sure. I think they've been discussing things, Roy's come out and said that he doesn't want to be considered. Now, I don't want to preempt, what the talks were and say that, Roy was offered a job. But, is it a blow to Celtic? I think there's plenty of candidates out there at the moment, all desperate for a job to get back in. And the Celtic job, no matter what anybody says, it might look from outside, especially down in England, that the Celtic job isn't up there with one of the big ones. But Alan Ruff will tell you, and I will tell you, that being with Celtic Football Club, there's a demand and there is pressure, and those are things that you have to handle, and it does put you in the limelight because Neil Lennon got the job, he won things, and I've travelled around a little bit, and I've been some of the UEFA conferences, and because Neil was involved in the Champions League, not like many coaches or managers down in England. So people have been talking about him, and they've been putting his quotations up there and his picture up there in some of the conferences, which is that's what Champions League football does to you.
Pat, can I move away just from the Republic situation and just move on to goalkeepers, which the two of us know obviously a lot about? The situation in Scotland just now, obviously we're in a great position. We have two fabulous goalkeepers, and obviously both of them going for the number one position, although you and myself never had to have a challenge from anybody because we were always the number one choice. Do you think that's a healthy situation?
Yeah, I think it is. You always, the problem when you have two good goalkeepers is keeping them happy now, Alan, that's always the problem. I think when you look back to Jim Leighton and Andy Gorham, for example, two quality goalkeepers, it wasn't always easy to keep both of them happy, whoever didn't play. Not like, in club football, if you look at Real Madrid, for example, at the moment, they're in a perfect situation because they've got one goalkeeper playing in the Championship, doing very well, and then you've got the other playing in the Champions League and international football and in the limelight. So it's not easy when you're number two in international football because you don't get that many games. So that's the biggest issue that any manager has. But I think Gordon Strachan will be delighted to have two quality goalkeepers to pick from. If one gets injured or if one sort of loses a little bit of form or whatever, he can call on the other one. And young David Marshall, who was at Celtic, of course, has done exceptionally well this year and has now probably nearly established himself as a number one.
Pat, just before you go, just one last point on this Celtic job. Does it open the door for the bookies' favourite now in Steve Clarke? Do you think he is an ideal candidate, or do you think they just go through this list and try and unearth somebody in the same Roy Keane mould?
Well, what is the Roy Keane mould? Is the question. I think you've got to look for one. If you write down your criteria, and you look at one who can, attract maybe players to the club, has got a proven track record and won in a few things, if possible, but somebody who can actually take the club and start unearthing this young talent that should be coming through the academy. For example, I think they have attracted well in the transfer market and brought young players in, but I think it's got to go hand in hand. I've always been saying it that, the tradition of Celtic and I think the future of Celtic is bringing young kids through the system. I think they've lost probably out a little bit in the last 3 years that they haven't brought enough through. So that's an objective that has to be met by the new manager for me.
Pat, as ever,
qualify, of course, for the Champions League, which is the biggest task of all. So they've candidates out there. Steve Clarke's one, Malcolm Mackay's another, Onie Coyle's another. So there is decent candidates who could fit that criteria, and I think the club will do their due diligence and get that person in. But the quicker they get it, the better.
Okay, Pat, as ever, delighted to have you on the Football Show. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, thank you.
Brilliant. Pat Bonnar there giving us his take on it. And of course, Roughie, Thomas giving us a few other candidates as well. I have to say, I have my doubts about Malky Mackay. I think his stock is still too high to consider coming back to Scotland, Thomas.
Yeah, I think Celtic are looking for someone with an affinity to the club. Malcolm Mackay fits that criteria right away, as does Owen Coyle, who's a supporter for a long time. But the Roy Keane one's a blow for them. Celtic will tell you they're discussing it with various contacts, and they have been. Roy Keane wasn't the only manager that they've approached, but as far as I know, he's the only one that made a concrete offer, which he has. He's knocked it back for various reasons. I believe one of them was that he didn't want to walk out in Ireland for a second time. I think Celtic did, allow him. We're going to allow him to continue his assistant manager duties at the Republic of Ireland and manage Celtic. I don't think he was keen on trying to combine the two of them, and it's a big blow now. Celtic are going to have to move fast, and I think for me, if the guys we've mentioned, the three guys, Malcolm Mackay, Owen Coyle and Steve Clarke, I think all three of them would be very good candidates.
Yeah, Steve Clarke has been spotted. I love around the area of Glasgow and the surrounding area, Roughie, because if you're spotted anywhere back in Scotland and there seems to be a job available, then I've had a few people texting me saying I spotted Steve Clarke at a hotel. Just thought I'd mark your card on it. So, he could have been meeting his best mate, but suddenly he's in the running again.
Well, that's the way it is in Glasgow. That's the way we operate. When you see somebody who's going to be identified with a job, you take it that he's up here for a purpose, and it just remains to be seen. There will be other names out there. I'm surprised you're saying not Malky Mackay. I think Malky Mackay fits the bill for me. I think he's come on in the last. Do
you think Celtic can match his wages and his ambitions? His stock is high in England.
Yeah, I know it's high, but we keep hearing Neil Lennon talking about Champions League football. There's not many managers get the chance to experience it at that level, and I know that might sound stupid. He might find Celtic as a stepping stone to get back to where he was. Yeah,
it's a possibility. Nevertheless, a talking point. I was just wondering, Roughie, was there a real buzz around Glenafton when you were seen in the area when you eventually took the job?
Well, again, when you're down there, you tend to. When I was at Newcombe, you used to sign the players before you went there, and the management down there were sharp enough to meet me in Ayr actually before I went down to Newcombe. But when I get down there, it's a lovely place.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots more to come on the Football Show. We'll have the golden years coming up in the next part of the programme. Basically, we'll play you 3 bits of music, Roughie, which again is not your strong point, to be honest with you.
Not the music, the movies. I'm quite happy with the music. That usually triggers a wee light bulb in my head to give me that one. But it remains to be seen. It'd be good to start off on a good first edition tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We're delighted to be on STV Glasgow, and we'll give you the chance to cast back your memory to movies, 3 bits of music, sporting facts from a year. Thomas, all you have to do is guess the year. Does it get you any good at that?
pretty poor at it, but I would imagine I'll be slightly better than my colleague here.
Yeah, there's no problem with that, I can tell you. We'll have the football headlines as well, but the main one is that Roy Keane has asked not to be considered for the Celtic job, and that leaves the door open for other candidates. Dermot Desmond will undoubtedly get his thinking cap on and get moving. Vital to get it done over the summer and in the early stages before the World Cup, Roughie?
Yes, it certainly is, because obviously there are candidates out there, who might be going to the World Cup, so he needs it early because he's got Champions League qualifiers to consider.
And talking of the World Cup, we'll be speaking about Qatar coming up, and it's all on Peter and Roughie's football show. We'll have a quick break, and then we're back to talk more football with Alan Rough, Thomas Jordan, and myself, Peter Martin. Join us after the break.